Mini episode 460 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Fashion Wrap Up, the definitive source for quick hits on fashion, style, celebrity, culture, and beauty news. Follow them on the web at fashionwrapup.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Your good friends Rick Morris and Kyle Ross here today in the FDH Lounge breaking down the NFC. We did one segment where it was the best and the worst teams. Now we're taking a look at the middles here. The three teams that Kyle gives a chance to win the NFC East and the four teams that Kyle gives a chance to win the non-San Francisco wild card berth in the NFC.
So basically, I kind of gotta extend my hand here. We're basing these segments totally off my projections, huh?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
yes.
well, I thank you for that.
Makes
it easier for me to keep track. You know how I get confused.
I am deferring to you on these. And again, for anybody that wants to check out what we said previously, we've taken two runs through on the NFC and indeed all of the NFL previously. But on the NFC, many episodes, 399 for the NFC East, 403 for the North, 406 for the South, and 413 for the West. And when we looked at win totals for the year, the second time we took a look through here, many episodes 441, 442, and 443, we broke down the league alphabetically into three segments there. So third time through talking about these teams. That's why we're just kind of keeping it at the things that have occurred to us since the last times we were talking about them. In the NFC East, we put Dallas in the ugly pile here as a team that Kyle indicates will not make the playoffs. I don't have a hard time agreeing with that one, frankly, even though I got them at 8-8. But I've got an interesting setup on the division. Washington at 8-8, winning the division. Philadelphia at 8-8, missing the playoffs. The New York Giants at 7-9. I got them all bunched up. I think you said, Kyle, you got them all at 8-8 and agreeing with me on Washington winning the division.
How scary is it that you and I agree on the Washington, I won't say their names.
Redskins. I'll say it for you.
Who?
You're not going to be that guy, are you?
What a disgraceful nickname. If somebody walked in, would you say that to them? No, you wouldn't say that.
There's a lot of Indians who like that. I was going to say
Native
Americans.
Whoa, you got Sitting Bull on speed dial all of a sudden over there?
I understand Dan Snyder's found quite a few.
Yeah, I know, yes. yeah, I'm sure it's the same guys Columbus found for Thanksgiving. Okay, anyway, on to a lighter subject. I don't like any of the teams in this division, which I know makes you happy because you hate this division.
Yes, overrated.
It's the second worst division in the entire league, the worst in the NFC. And I think you and I, in coming to the conclusion that Washington will come out on top here, it's not so much that either of us like Washington. Stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth. It's almost a process of elimination situation.
By default,
and
exactly.
Kind of the way that, certainly I know the way I view the league, that it just sort of spits out Washington as my pick. You've kind of, I don't want to say you've come across to my way of thinking, but, maybe we're just looking at this the same way. In that, let's take a look at the three teams in question here. Washington, Philly, and the Giants. The Giants, every year, I never have a good read on them.
Right.
And this year's really no exception. I mean, the reason I'm putting them here and not in the bad pile is I could see them doing okay this year. This division certainly is wide open.
Right.
They finished last year strong.
Right.
After an 0-6 start, they were not they were not that bad.
No.
As 0-6. I don't think they were as good as the 7-2 finish either.
Probably
Remember what we
not.
talked about with Dallas, kind of how they always get they got to 8-8 the real funky way.
Yes.
They're terrible as a favorite, great as an underdog.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants did it a more conventional way. They got waxed by all the teams that wound up being good on their schedule, and they beat up on all the crappy teams they faced. Mm-hmm. They had a terrible turnover rate last year, so that indicates they'll be better this year because turnover rate tends to fluctuate pretty wildly from year to year. They also had a horrible point differential last year, which, again, was reflective of them being blown out by the bad teams. So I'll call for improvement, but only slight, 8-8. I'm not ready. To me, the Giants, because I don't have the good handle on them, I'm not saying terrible. I'm not saying playoffs. I'm just saying 8-8. That just feels right.
Okay.
I almost pick the Giants to go 8-8 every year anyway. Philly is a team that I can almost assure you will be certainly worse when it comes to the record Now, if you're asking me to buy any of the teams in this division long term, I'm still going with Chip Kelly and the Eagles.
Yes.
I love what he's doing. I just think this is a step back year. I'm not sold on Nick Foles long term.
Okay.
There is no way he is repeating last year's numbers, where he had only 2 interceptions. No way, no chance, no how. There's it's just impossible. Turnover ratio, we talked about how it fluctuates wildly year to year. I believe the Eagles were second to last in turnover ratio in Andy Reid's final year. They were top 3 or 2 last year in Chip Kelly, so they'll be somewhere in the middle this year.
Right.
Their defense is still kind of bad.
Yeah, it's a little bit improved. Maybe,
They lost.
But yeah,
They lost to Deshaun Jackson.
yeah,
And
that's
I'm
gonna hurt.
sorry, Riley Cooper. Speaking of people with not exactly progressive minds in the NFC East. Okay, Riley Cooper is not going to be as good this year.
First guy off my bench on both of my fantasy teams, so I'm hoping for at least 80 to 90% of that. But yeah,
No way.
he's going to be hard pressed.
So add it all together, and plus, they went from 4 to 10 wins.
Yeah.
So to me, this is an 8 or 9 win team. I'm just going to say 8. Remember, they play the first place schedule.
Yep.
Which means they've got Seattle and Green Bay they have to deal with.
Well, and we're going to see this with the AFC as well when we get to this. Part of it is the calculus. I know it is with you. It certainly is with me that you can't pick 9 or 10 teams to make the playoffs repeating from last year. There have to be. And there are some of these where it's real easy to see who falls by the wayside.
Yeah, but
We've
this
already
year's
covered Carolina.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about
Kansas City in the AFC,
etc. Philadelphia is one of the bubble teams. To me, so is Indianapolis. There are so many other teams that are so strong. That's going to drive my whole thing here, and that's why I'm going with Washington. It's completely by default. I agree completely with what you said about the process of elimination. That's how I end up at Washington. Part of it is, too, bump with a first-year coach. You get that as well. Jay Gruden seems like the kind of guy that's going to come in and give a little bit of the steroid effect. The team's going to look a little better in there. Defense is still atrocious, but they may have a chance to outscore some teams this
but
year.
you could say that here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I think every defense in this division is atrocious.
Yeah.
Name a good defense in this
There
division.
are no real good defenses in this division. You're right about that.
There's just none. And, RG3, okay, as he talked about too much, maybe a little, certainly overhyped, maybe overrated. But, it's funny. Everyone kind of rips on the fortune that Washington gave away to St. Louis to get him. At the end of the day, the Washington Redskins have RG3, who is a player who can make plays in this league, and a division title. St. Louis is still stuck with your boy, Chief Checkdown, or as my good friend Chad Repack now likes to refer to him as Wounded Ram, as we're making, as I'm channeling my inner Dan Snyder with insensitive remarks there. So, Washington has shown the capability that they can win this division. They just did it 2 years ago.
But here's the thing, though. I will say this. I'm going to undermine my point on Washington also. RG3 had, 2012 was the year in the league of
I don't think he can ever be that good again. He may never be that good again.
Again, a gimmick offense, not sustainable over the long haul, based on the fact that, he got hurt running that offense. As a conventional pocket quarterback in this league, what is his ceiling? I think Jay Gruden is going to get a good amount out of him, and I think he's not going to be foolish enough to make him dependent on the read option quite as much. But yeah, I see Washington basically eking out 8-8 and being cannon fodder, quite frankly, for San Francisco in the first round.
By the way, another good thing for Washington, this was my kind of final nudge I needed for them. They play Dallas in Week 17.
Ooh.
You know what happens when you play Dallas in Week 17.
That's true.
If you're an NFC East team,
getting
you
in.
win the division.
Yeah.
Washington just did it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I love what you said about the turnover among playoff teams. I've talked about it many times in years past when doing the show with you, that this year, it seems, compared to previous years, there's fewer obvious calls to drop out of the playoff teams. Carolina and Kansas City were the only two that came to mind. So you've got to make some tough calls. Philadelphia is the consensus choice to win this division. I'm going to go against the grain with you. It's pretty scary that we agree the Washington Redskins win the NFC East.
Exactly.
Somehow, some way.
And quite frankly, if there was a history of 9 or 10 teams repeating, I would just go with Philadelphia.
I like Philadelphia better than Washington long term. I don't think, if Washington wins the division this year, I'm not going to pick them to repeat next year.
Well, here's the thing, too. Philadelphia, I still maintain, is a better team than Washington. But here's the thing. The tiebreakers don't care.
Yes.
The tiebreakers seem to go with the worst team. Let us not forget that the 2002 Butch Davis coached Cleveland Browns won a tiebreaker with the New England Patriots, when they were in the midst of a 3-out-of-4 Super Bowl run, does anybody on God's green earth want to tell me that the Browns of that year were better than the Patriots? They were nowhere near as good as the Patriots, same record notwithstanding. It's kind of the same thing here. Life's not fair for Philadelphia in this instance. 8-8, 8-8, but I think Washington's going to take the tiebreaker some way, somehow.
By the way, your boy Triv went on the air that year.
Not my boy.
And actually said that Butch Davis was a better NFL coach than Bill Cowher.
Yeah, I can believe it.
I think I've said that before on the show. I just wanted to say it again.
I can believe
that a
it.
human being went on the air and said that.
You're doing a fine job of illustrating why I don't listen to any terrestrial radio hardly in the city of Cleveland. That's an excellent example right there. So in the NFC East, those are the three quote-unquote middle teams that we see jockeying it out for the divisional title with Washington on top.
Yeah, I can see, if the Giants or Philly won the division, I wouldn't be like, oh, my God, I can't believe that. That's so shocking. I just, my numbers support, especially with the improvement that they're likely to have, Washington.
Exactly.
Teams that improve significantly tend to make the playoffs.
Yes, exactly. So essentially the other four teams we're going to be talking about might as well almost be in another bracket because they're fighting, in our estimation, for one wild card not going to the San Francisco 49ers. Four teams in there. Let's start in the North. Let's start with the team that you and I are both giving it to. Chicago Bears, I got them at 10-6. Still some questions about this team defensively, but realistically, if there weren't questions about them defensively, we'd have them in the top four, and we'd have them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. That's how great this offense is.
They're very popular in Vegas
Yeah.
in the off-season betting. They've gotten some action on win total, a lot of action on over the win total, Super Bowl, winning the division. This has been a popular team, and not just because the Chicago market.
Right.
The defense is going to be better this year, mainly because it really can't be worse.
Yeah.
There's some, like with Dallas, it's tough to see how their defense would improve. This team made some changes. They should be better on that side of the ball. And also, as New Orleans proved last year, defense can fluctuate a lot more than offense. Offense tends to be more consistent from year to year than defense in this league. And I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. It is amazing to me how in one season the narrative of the Chicago Bears flipped so much under Mark Trestman. The way he's a much better coach than Mike Ditka ever was.
Ooh.
I'll say that again. I think I've said that again before in the show, too. I'm running through all the hits.
Okay.
This has the chance to be the best Bears offense ever. I mean, I don't know if I wasn't around in the 40s, Sid Luckman days. I don't know how you'd even compare the two. But this offense,
Bronco
looks
Legursky says hi.
this is the best offense in Bears history.
It could very well be.
I mean, you've got Marshall and Jeffrey. I know we always like to look beyond just the starting two, but Marshall and Jeffrey are as good as any starting duo.
You don't have to look beyond them. And Martellus Bennett as a tight end in there as the third option, and they're pretty good. Which, by the way, he's not even necessarily the third option because Matt Forte, in addition to toting the rock, gets a lot of receptions and a lot of receiving yards as well. Very versatile in that regard.
This is kind of weird. It's similar to Seattle. I'm not going to put Chicago, obviously, on the same level as Seattle, but when I take a look at an organization at a macro level and I just kind of like where they're going, I like the coach, like the GM, which is the case here with the Bears, I'm just inclined to pick them to make the playoffs.
Okay.
The only reasons I see them maybe coming up short and to one of these other three teams we're about to talk about is maybe that defense doesn't improve very much. And we talked about this with Romo. I think we should talk about with Jay Cutler. Isn't his narrative kind of close to being written too? I mean, he's kind of been that's why, everyone who hates Tony Romo doesn't want to admit it. Tony Romo, Jay Cutler, and the quarterback who we're going to talk about momentarily, Matt Stafford, they're all the same guy to me. Yeah. Wildly inconsistent, very good, but they make their worst decisions at the worst times.
Yeah.
So, Jay Cutler, I know he's made the playoffs before, but is he all of a sudden going to take this quantum leap after being in the league for so long? Does he have to? I don't know. But ultimately, I'm going to respect what's happening in Vegas. I will not respect what's happening with my foot right now. I apologize. And
no problem.
I'm going to pick the Bears to make the playoffs.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a counterpoint on Jay Cutler. And I've never really been a Jay Cutler guy, but I'm going to throw two names out at you. Eli Manning, Joe Flacco. They have 3 Super Bowls between them. So,
by the way, that's a tier of quarterbacks for me, along with Romo and Stafford.
Okay.
Those, to me, I think when I rated the quarterbacks in the offseason, they might be off by a spot here. So I had them rated 11 through 15
right.
in the league.
Now, in the case of Flacco, the defense had a good amount to do with it, not nearly what they did in 2000. In the case of Eli Manning, not so much. He really kind of elevated his game. But Jay Cutler,
and Flacco got real hot during that run. That's why he's paid what he's being paid right now.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say Cutler has far better weapons than either of those quarterbacks did when they won Super Bowls.
Agreed.
So that could certainly help as well in terms of the elevation. At 9-7, in my estimation, Detroit nipping at Chicago's heels but coming up short. Everything I said about Chicago applies here. Supersonic offense, but again, a defense that I think is probably even worse than Chicago's, and that's, to me, the biggest reason I'm picking them below them. It's a thing of, 4 or 5 different spots there defensively. You've got really good players. You start getting into Sue and Fairley and a couple of the other guys.
Well, Fairley's been an underachiever.
An underachiever, but I think this is going to be a breakthrough year for him. I'm giving him that in advance as we're talking here. But again, massive holes remaining in a couple of different areas, not least of which the secondary.
The secondary looks really bad.
Secondary is pathetic. That's going to kill them in this division, I think. So, to me, they sort of stack up as a poor man's Chicago. That's why I have them a game back and missing the playoffs.
The division was theirs last year to win. They gagged horribly. Mm-hmm. When we talked about Green Bay in our discussion of the best teams in the NFC, we referenced that Green Bay should not have made the playoffs this year. Last year was Detroit's time to win the NFC North. They were the only team in this division that finished with a positive point differential. Mm-hmm. I think I gave out this stat when we talked about Detroit previously, but they are the only team since the NFL went to the current divisional format in 02 that has been the only team to finish with a positive point differential in this division and not win that division.
Okay.
So, for them, thankfully, it ended the Jim Schwartz era. I know that, that's another, Jim Schwartz is kind of, when it comes to coaches, the equivalent to Sam Bradford of quarterbacks between you and I. We just don't see him.
Right.
We're not eye to eye on him. I thought Jim Schwartz was terrible. I'm sure maybe he can be a fine coordinator in this league, but he's not a head coach. My issue is, though, they didn't get the guy they wanted as the head coach.
Right.
Doesn't that matter a little bit? They wanted Ken Wisenhunt. They wound up with Jim Caldwell.
I would have rather had Wisenhunt.
Yeah, you think? And Caldwell, Wisenhunt has his faults.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a curious decision, I thought, on his part. But Caldwell, I'm not sold on him. No. He had Peyton Manning, and when that went away, he had that disastrous season in Indianapolis. I mean, granted, that's a tough situation that no one probably could have dealt with, but I just think Detroit comes up a little bit short. They underachieved their Pythagorean win expectation last year, so they'll win more games. I, too, have them 9-7.
Okay, yeah, that's where I got them in there. They'll go as far as the offense can carry them. It's as simple as that. I don't know how many teams in the league you can boil it down to one sentence, but you kind of can with the Detroit Lions. No question about it. The same is true to a lesser extent, a decently lesser extent, with the Atlanta Falcons, who I have at 8-8. This is one of the rare things here. You're talking about convergence before in our points of view. You actually are picking Atlanta for a higher record than I am this year, which I know that's the first time
probably ever since we've been doing this show that I've picked Atlanta to be better than you have.
I mean, I'm a big Matty Ice guy. I think offensively, it's going to be a big bounce back this year. Tony Gonzalez retires, but most importantly, franchise wide receiver Julio Jones is going to be back. Roddy White, I'm not quite as sanguine about his possibilities because everything last year looked like it might have been the beginning of the end as far as
he was banged up too, though.
Nature.
He was banged up too, to be fair.
He was, but I just question, is he ever going to look 100% ever again? Not that he's lost speed, although he probably has at his age, but more importantly than that, is he going to be able to fight off the injuries, keep him from being chronic? The running game,
I hated that Steven Jackson signing last year, and I think
it's
that
horrible.
They now agree with me.
Antone Smith, who had a good preseason, could be the real deep sleeper here in that bunch. I grabbed him in both of my non-keeper leagues this year, but again, defensively, that's where the questions still come in. And this is sort of a recurring motif, at least so far, for the teams that we're talking about as NFC wildcard possibilities, because there are questions there. And Atlanta did do some things in the offseason to soup up that defense, but to
it's
me,
still
that's
not good.
The questions still remain. And if you're looking at this offense consistently having to outscore other teams, well, that's why I got them at 8-8. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't.
I've called this team affectionately the pavement of the NFL many times. They will just probably never achieve that breakthrough success. But even in my wildest dreams, that I had been very hard on the Falcons, particularly during that 2 seasons ago when they had home field advantage leading up to that Seattle playoff game, which I thought they were very fortunate to win. I know we both were. We talked about that a lot at the time. But even in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined they would have fallen as far as they did last year. Clearly a worst-case scenario. They, to me, are a team that falls into that group that we'll see its win total increase by at least 4 games. I'm going to say 5 at 9. It's funny. Other than the NFC West, does any team in the NFC have a good defense?
Wow, good question.
They're all pretty bad. And it's funny with the teams we're talking about here, the Chicago.
Carolina, you put on the ugly pile, that front seven powers them to a certain level.
I mean, their secondary's pretty bad. But still, you're right. I mean, Carolina's, you're right. New Orleans, there'll probably be some regression there after the big jump last year under Rex Ryan.
Out of those 12 teams, I'm going to say something that is going to make some eyes bug out. You know who's at least in the top 6 out of those 12? I think at this point is Minnesota.
Whoa, you're really putting a lot of faith in Mike Zimmer.
I
mean, they were horrible last year.
I think
they made Brian Hoyer in NFL look like an NFL starter.
I think you're going to see a good improvement. That's a clip and save prediction for me.
Okay, and you will clearly clip if it does not come true.
Yes.
But it's funny, all 4 of these teams.
I'll clip it out of the archives.
With Roddy White, the Jones-White combo, you could have made a case that this maybe was the best receiving combo in the league going into last year.
Yeah.
But they've slipped below Marshall and Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Who knows? They may have I mean, it's very unequal with Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate in Detroit, obviously. But I think Golden Tate's a very solid number 2. You throw in Eric Ebron as well, the rookie tight end. They've got a lot more weapons than Atlanta, too, it looks like, offensively. But I like Matt Ryan better than both Jay Cutler and Matt Stafford.
Right.
I'll say
I think
that.
That's true.
But again, the defense is going to keep them. And here's the thing: they and Tampa Bay, I have them both improving. So it's kind of hard for me to sort of say I don't think one's going to be dramatically better than the other. So.
Right.
I'm going to defer to Vegas, who likes Chicago and doesn't like Detroit, and that's kind of what led me to Chicago.
Okay.
Tampa Bay, I don't have much to say. They're going to be much improved this year under Lovie Smith, but I think their ceiling is limited by the quarterback position. I do not think Josh McCown is the long-term answer there. I know they're trying to recreate the situation he had last year in Chicago with tall receivers, drafted Mike Evans.
I love what they got with Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans.
And the Safarin Jenkins, the tight end they drafted as well to Washington. Kind of a head case, but he can be very good as well. I'm not sure that Mike Glennon's not a better option than Josh McCown. I
got him at 7 and 9. I'm going to say this because I'm pretty sure the last time around, if not then, and certainly the time before, I do remember bashing Lovie Smith a lot. I'm going to go back on that a little bit because Lovie Smith did say that he sees Mike Glennon as his quarterback of the future, just McCown for this year. I can live with that. I thought he was coming in and doing the Eric Mangini, I can't win with this tantrum of just everyone is guilty until proven innocent or guilty and cannot be proven innocent. No. He's keeping an open mind on Mike Glennon for the future, and that's all I can ask for in any situation here. So I'm going to go back on my bashing of Lovie Smith now that he's clarified.
Of the 4 teams we've talked about competing for this last wild card, I'll say Tampa Bay's got the best defense.
Oh, they do.
They've got 2 bona fide Defensive Player of the Year candidates in McCoy and David.
Yeah. Well,
2 candidates.
Well, and that's the thing, too. I mean, I got Tampa Bay 7 and 9, and part of me looks at that and it's kind of like, what? When you're saying you got them as one of the 4 teams in there. But when I look at it, like you said, best defense by far of the 4. Quarterback position
is the weakest of the 4 easily.
Yeah.
I mean, Josh McCown compared to Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, and Jay Cutler is significantly below.
There is that, but we just talked about the passing weapons. Doug Martin Superstore coming back, looks like he's going to be fine in the running game. I mean, we talk about if they had this in the case of Chicago, Detroit, and Atlanta, if they had solid defenses, we'd be talking about them in the upper echelon. If Tampa Bay had the quarterback situation figured out, we'd be talking about them in the upper echelon. All 4 of these teams are, at the beginning of the season, missing something that keeps us from putting them in that upper echelon. And like you said, for Tampa Bay, it's quarterback.
Tampa Bay did make the trade for Logan Mankins late.
Yes.
In the preseason.
Will help.
I think because their offensive line was another weak spot for them.
Well, everybody kept getting staph infections, but yeah.
Yes. I mean, it was funny when they looked at their first pick in this past April's draft. There were kind of 3 spots that everyone was talking about. A second receiver, which is ultimately where they went, or then quarterback, where they didn't go because they brought in McCown, or offensive line. So, I think this team is kind of on a positive trajectory.
Okay.
And I would not be shocked if they got that last wild card. I just think that they kind of have that feel of the team that won the offseason.
Yeah.
Teams that win the offseason often do not win in the regular season.
That's true.
Just ask their neighbor to the south, Miami.
Yeah.
Who, more often than not falls in that category.
Happens in MLB, too. That the teams that win the offseason sort of have a hard time translating that. And in the case of Tampa Bay, and I think it wouldn't be the first time that happened to them if that were the case. So, and looking at the middles in the NFC, you and I both have Washington as winning the utterly mediocre NFC East. You and I both have Chicago as winning essentially the other bracket here of the middles.
This is frightening.
Yeah.
We have the same 6 playoff teams in the NFC.
Yeah.
Finishing the exact same order, right?
I've got
I go Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans, Washington, San Francisco, Chicago.
That's exactly how I have it.
Jesus.
That's exactly how I have it. I have, as my first-round playoff winners, San Francisco and New Orleans. Second-round playoff winners, I have Seattle and Green Bay. And Seattle winning the NFC Championship game in a rematch. The NFC, as I see it, goes full circle. From the first night of the season, Championship Sunday, it's going to be Green Bay at Seattle in both instances. And I think coming up short in both instances. The entire thing will go full circle.
You know what's frightening?
What?
I think the exact same thing for the playoffs.
Yeah.
I feel very uncomfortable making a pick right now compared to last year.
Yeah.
There are 3 teams that can win the NFC: Seattle, San Francisco, and Green Bay.
Yes.
I'm gonna stick with Seattle. Because here's the thing. Ultimately, if they get the home field advantage like we think they are, who's going in there and winning?
Well,
no one.
And here's the thing, too. In a vacuum, everyone criticizes you for going with the chalk. But as we've pointed this out, and again, this is our third pass-through on evaluating these teams. We've said this before. We'll say it again. Seattle's not like Baltimore from the year before. They're not like Green Bay. They're not like the Giants. They are on the ascendant curve of what looks to be a dynasty. This is a team you could pick to go back to back and feel very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we should have talked about that with Seattle.
Okay.
I went into that diatribe about San Francisco, and I totally neglected Seattle.
Okay.
You're right. When the key with trends is understanding them.
Yes.
And when you take a look at that trend that no defending Super Bowl champion has won a playoff game in like 10 years,
right,
you have to take a look at the Super Bowl champions. Between the New England quote-unquote dynasty, the 3 Super Bowl titles in 4 years, and the Seahawks last year, there was no team, I'll actually call you out for one thing. One reference, the Green Bay team. Because remember, we both loved them coming off that Super Bowl.
Yeah,
they went 15-1 in that regular season,
you're
and
right.
they got ran into the fluky Giants.
Yes.
But this Seattle team, to me, certainly in the last 10 years, is the champion with the best chance to repeat.
Yeah.
I mean, those other teams were teams that were not like Seattle, dominant regular season, home field advantage, win the Super Bowl. They were snuck into the playoffs, got hot at the right time, and oh my God, they just won the Super Bowl. Well, so if you remember the last 2 years, I said the Giants weren't going to make the playoffs. They didn't. And the same with the Ravens last year. They didn't.
Exactly.
So this Seattle team shares very little in common with those last 2 champions.
They share, I'd say, pretty much nothing at this point in common, and it's going to be fascinating watching them try to defend their NFC championship and their NFL championship this year. So we shall see, and I guess we'll talk more about Seattle when we get through the AFC and pick an AFC champion.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the periodic table of elements.